podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to How We're the Podcast. And for so long, I have thanked you all for joining us after defeat as we limped towards the end of the season. We all tried to kind of keep the faith that everything would be all right in the end and hope that the lads would be able to turn it on when it mattered. And now we can finally gather after winning the first leg of the playoff semi-final at Coventry City, a place where we haven't gotten a result since I was 6 months old, which made me feel very old. And I'm very grateful that we've broken that hoodoo. And I'm not going to be speaking about that season after season when we play Coventry City. I was thinking about starting with one of those, we give you one hell of a beating speeches, but it's too soon, isn't it? We have to keep coming back to the fact that it's just half time in this tie and it is the playoffs, which means anything usually does happen in these second legs. We've seen some corkers where it's gone back and forth and last minute goals and all that sort of stuff. So we've still got some nail biting to come. But I am glad that we can talk through a victory. And to join me to start with, a guy who has been out since, kind of would speak in the morning after. He's been out for the last 12 hours, I think, and just returned after his adventures after the final whistle, which probably included emptying Pizza Uno by the sounds of it, although we can't remember much about it. It is Jonny Hawley. All right, mate?
Aye, all right might be a stretch, like the morning after the night before. I tell you what, I hope that pizza was nice because I paid for it, but I can't remember eating it. Like, so I hope the pizza was as good as the game because I tell you what, I thoroughly enjoyed that and I can remember every second of that game. It's so nice to be joining you and talking through a Sunderland win. We were just speaking before. I remember recording with you after the Oxford game, Chris, and that was some. That was some effort trying to talk through that game, but I think this one's going to be a little bit more enjoyable to sink our teeth into, innit?
Well, you see, you sound more bouncy now with a stinking hangover than you sounded after the Oxford game when you were compass mentis.
Well, that should tell everyone everything they need to know about that game. If anyone didn't watch that 90 minutes, the fact that I feel this chipper after having about 1 million pints and waking up after nowhere near enough sleep, that tells you everything you need to know. That game was horrible, but this one was fantastic.
Yes, it was, and looking forward to getting into it. Although I do have to tell the listeners that Jonny hasn't got his camera set up this morning, but I have got this image of him lying in his pit, surrounded by just pizza all over the bed and pizza boxes all over the room and all this sort of stuff. So I think it's probably better with the imagination on that. But to also help us is a man you've probably already heard if you've listened to our podcast. He was, as always, kind of upbeat, and there was words like perfect and unbelievable and all this sort of stuff, and he couldn't help himself but join us again to talk about it because he's been bathed in the highlights and talking about it, and everybody listening to as much as he can, looking online and on the socials because he just can't get enough of it. It's Gavin Henderson. All right, mate?
Yes, mate, more than all right. Yeah, can't get enough of it. And like I said to you earlier, I've been away a bit this week, so I've had to listen to you lot chat constantly about Sunderland when I was like, I wish I was on that one. So I'm just getting me tally back up. I'm on the pod again this morning. But for once, I'm on the other side of the chair, so I can you can quiz me, Chris, and make me justify my position on why I think everything's amazing.
Oh, well, that's it. I'm going to be an absolute prick and play devil's advocate. I've got to. That's my job in this seat. But yeah, speaking of that, bit of jet setting, and then boarding an airport, and you just thought, well, I'll give someone a bell and record a podcast with a couple of beers.
Yeah, well, I'm in an airport while there's building works going on, and right next to a kids' play area, and the kids are going absolutely mental. And the Coventry fan I was speaking to looked like he was in a barn or something outside with his high vis vest on. So yeah, it was an interesting one, but I can't get enough of it at the minute. And why not? Oh wait, man, we've just put in one of the best performances of the season away from home. So I'll happily sit here all day and talk about Sunderland if it means that I can just get me fix in. You know what I mean? I'm like a crackhead when it comes to this club. I'm just obsessed. Can't get enough of it.
Well, there's another one. What did you just say? Best away performances of the season. I'm looking forward to getting into this.
One off. Although, hang on, we can't skip past that because I think that's a fair comment. I'm not being over the top saying that.
I didn't say it wasn't. I'm just saying we'll get into it, mate. I told you I'm going to be a prick on this podcast. But yeah, but actually, just on that, Gav, speaking to him, because I mean, bloody hell, do you think, in a way that their overconfidence potentially backfired a little bit?
Absolutely. That was sort of when I was trying to decompress from the game yesterday. I was thinking, I think they were pretty cocky actually, as it collectively, not just the players and the manager, and but the fans. They were telling us, we've been praying to get Sunderland, and almost thought and I get it to a degree, because look, we've not beat them for years until yesterday. And if we'd been in that situation, I wonder what our reaction would have been. But I get it to a degree. I just think they were probably overconfident, and they maybe underestimated us. And I did hear Frank Lampard before the game talking about how it was very difficult to prepare because you don't know which version of Sunderland you're going to get. And it was impossible to predict what we got, because, that you think of the team selection, the tactics and all the rest of it. Nothing we've done recently reflects on what we saw last night. And we've been saying it for weeks on here, this whole period was preparation for the playoffs. And that meant that there would be a game plan. There would be some sort of rabbit coming out of the hat from Régis Le Bris. But there were several rabbits that came out of his hat last night. And I think that was perhaps the most pleasing aspect of it. We weren't predictable for once. We were all probably in our heads, and you and Martin did it on the pod that went out on match day, trying to work out what the team would be. I don't think anybody could have predicted that would be the team. And if someone's claiming that that was what they were predicting, someone's clearly leaked them the team news, because nobody saw that coming. I think it was just nice for once to be really surprised by. So you see the team like, oh bloody hell, and then you're trying to work out what the formation's going to be, and you're looking at it and you're like, is it a 4-4-2? Is it? Is Mayenda going to be playing wide? Is Isidor going to be playing wide? At various points in the game, we had different people moving around the front line. We had, like I said before, that Isidor, Mayenda and the face switching, and Roberts obviously in the front line as well. And I think we were really unpredictable, and that Coventry, they couldn't have prepared for what they got. Yes, we've had performances earlier in the season that were quite similar, but I just don't think anybody seen what they got coming. And ultimately, that's what won us the game. I thought Lampard seemed flummoxed. I heard him after the game, and he just didn't really know. He didn't seem like somebody who was of clear mind, where Le Bris did. And again, I guess it kind of justifies the position, Chris, that we took going into the whole thing, where we decided we were going to do it this way, because ultimately, when we were sitting and we were going, look, we know that it's difficult when we're losing games and yada yada yada. It's hard to get your head around it. At the end of the day, all that was important was this game and the game on Tuesday. And for me, I don't know about you lads, but from 5 minutes into the game, you could tell that this wasn't the same team that played against Oxford and QPR and all the rest of it. It was a focused Sunderland team, much like the one earlier in the season when we were sort of battling for the top two places in the table. So yeah, I was just so pleased with what I got to see, and it's definitely a good start. Look, it's only half time in the tie. We can't get too carried away, but at the same time, you want to get carried away because it was encouraging, and for myself, anyways, I've remained really steadfast, and I've been on board with the approach. So it almost felt like the position was justified from having seen what I watched. I was like, that's exactly why I stayed pretty calm, because I felt like that performance was coming, and I said that on the reaction pod. I almost felt it in my water that we were going to get that kind of performance from the team. But I would say that because I'm half full Henderson, as you know.
Yeah, it's not like you to get carried away, mate. Jonny, just on, Gav mentioned a few potential surprises. When all Mike Bassett went all 4-4-2, I thought Mayenda would play from the left. Actually, when I saw the actual list of players who were playing, Sky Sports put it up as a two up top. We've had mixed results with it. I think Sheffield United, we were quite good, and then I can't remember, there was a game later on in the season at the Stadium of Light where people were asking for him to go two up top again, and they were asking for weeks and weeks, and then he did, and then it didn't actually work for one reason or another. So it had mixed results, and obviously the big one was Mepham dropping out and Ballard coming in for that game. And again, me and Martin talked about that before the game, saying that against two strikers like Wright and Sims potentially, who we thought might line up, that Ballard might be the better option. But were you surprised that with the setup we went with?
I was, but it was a pleasant surprise. I thought it was a really brave call from Le Bris to play that team, because obviously, look, he's taken some stick over the last few weeks. And, some of it you can argue deservedly so because the results haven't been good enough. But also, as Gav said, it was clearly all done with an eye on the playoffs. Well, more than an eye. The whole setup of the past probably 6 to maybe even 8 weeks has clearly been done with, the playoffs in mind and getting the team ready. So it was nice to be surprised by the team, but also I think it was, look, nobody would have seen the specific 11 coming, I don't think, but I wasn't shocked that he made a bold call with the selection because I think it's something that's been coming. And so, yeah, I was delighted to see that team because I think you get the best out of Isidor and Mayenda when they play together because, Isidor is somebody who isn't going to do loads outside of getting in behind and getting on the end of chances, which we saw last night, with his goal. And Mayenda's somebody who's a lot more involved in the build-up. So it was, in the absence of Romain Mundle, I think it was the strongest lineup he could have picked in terms of going forward. So it was something that for me, I think, I wouldn't say it needed to be done, but certainly with the benefit of hindsight, you look at it and you think that was definitely the right team to pick because we had to name a team that gave them something to think about going in the other direction because I think we were always going to defend and defend manfully in that first half. It was clearly the way the game was going to go. I think if you'd spoken to any Sunderland or Coventry fan before the game, we'd have all said the same thing, which is if Sunderland get through the first 15, 20 minutes without conceding a goal, they'll be on the way there to a decent result. So we knew that we were going to have to sit in and have backs to the wall in a sense, but naming a team like that with Isidor and Mayenda together, it gave us an outlet and it gave us something that could cause them problems going forward. So I was delighted to read the team. And a word on Ballard as well, who I thought, he was fantastic last night. I thought he was committed, he was brave, and to have had injuries this season and been in and out of the side and, generally not preferred over Mepham and O'Nien to come in last night for such a big game and under all that pressure, I thought he deserves a little shout out because it was a brave call again from Le Bris and it's one that's paid off.
Just on that, I want to ask you too about this. Can you remember a better centre half performance than that from Ballard?
Well, I was gonna put in because we've been talking about it in recent weeks, the performances by Bailey Wright and Danny Bart against Sheffield Wednesday in the League One playoffs.
I was racking my brains to think like the times when we've had a centre half play that well, like even for Sky afterwards to pull his stats up on the screen and show. He was by far and away the best player on the pitch in terms of every defensive stat. And even just for the eye test, I can't remember a centre half having a game as good as that. He just like proper defending, wasn't it? In an era where there's not really many of them proper defenders about anymore. Everyone's meant to be good on the ball and it's all about building out from the back. Dan Ballard just played like a proper old school centre half who just got in. He just wanted to defend and put his head in the way of everything. And I think if they'd fired a bullet at him, he would have tried to head it away. He was that committed. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I genuinely can't remember. Bailey Wright in that semi-final against Sheff Wed is probably the one that comes to mind in terms of more recent games. But even going right back through my time as a fan, I can't remember many more committed defensive performances than that.
Well, one of the lads in the chat said he fell asleep last night. Instead of counting sheep, he was counting how many times Ballard headed the ball away.
Yeah.
But Gav, look, I mean, I'm sure you expected nothing less, but I did tell you I was going to be an absolute prick today. And let's get into the start of the game because, look, first 20 minutes, and as you said, it's kind of the game plan. And look, we'll come on to. It's not going to be the last time we mention Dan Ballard because in the context of how we actually played. But you look at especially the first 20 minutes, 25 minutes potentially. Look, we were penned in, and you could say, right, that's the game plan. And you could say, right, well, fair enough. First 5 minutes, I think there were 3 or 4 corners straight off the bounce. I think we got forward a little bit, and then after Coventry came into our half, that was pretty much it. We didn't get out for 20 minutes. And in those 4 corners, or however many there was, Patterson just flapped at one. Completely and utterly flapped at one. I mean, the way he came out, he clearly didn't actually know where the ball was because he was miles away from the ball. The ball luckily bounced in our favour, and we ended up getting the ball clear. I think it was O'Nien maybe swiped at one. I think it was Hume eventually who got the ball away. But if that bounces the wrong way in the first 5 minutes, we're a goal down 5 minutes in, and then we're chasing our tails, and Coventry are up, and the fans are up, and everything like that. And it's a completely different game. And you have said brilliant away performance. You've said all of that, and I don't disagree with you. But when you have that sort of game plan, do you not have to almost rely on an element of luck to not concede?
Yeah, I think in the preparations for the game, though, it will have been fully expected that Coventry were going to come at us from the off. They've sold their ground out. Fans obviously really up for it. What else was going to happen? They weren't going to sit back and let us have the ball. So you almost have to think we were expecting to be under the cosh for at least 15, 20 minutes of the game. And I guess in that situation, yeah, there is an element of luck. But you've just got to back yourselves. Like, we're good. We've done this before. We've went away from home this season at tough places. I keep referring to that Luton game, and I know Luton went down, but every time I think of like where we really had our backs to the wall and we were challenged physically, that game's the first one that comes to mind. And this was another kettle of fish because Coventry are obviously a better side than Luton. But we've done it before. So yeah, there's an element of luck with all of this. Even the goals we scored, there's an element of luck. You've got to time the runs perfectly and the pass has got to be perfectly weighted. And, as we saw with the second goal, sometimes you need a helping hand from the opposition. There's luck in all aspects of football. I just think it was about, believing in our own game plan. And our game plan was to sit in and defend. And look, I don't think in every team up and down the country, you're going to find a squad of players as committed as the Sunderland team were last night to a game plan that's been asked of them from their coaches. I mean, you've got to really be bought into how you play to be able to do that, because it's not fun. You're pinned in, you haven't got the ball, you're just, shelling away balls with your head and just trying to clear your lines and making sure they don't get near your box and stuff. That isn't particularly fun. When you're a little kid and you're playing football, you don't dream of heading the ball away, do you? You dream of, skinning 5 players and sticking it in the top corner. So I think you've got to be really bought into what you're trying to do. And to me, that's one of the big indicators of how much these players are on side with the manager, because it would have been very easy to lose sight of that. Even though those 5 games we've just lost were unimportant games, it does affect your confidence and your mentality, and you start questioning what you're trying to do. And there wasn't a single second of that game where I felt the players didn't get it. Within 5 minutes, I was like, I know what Sunderland's turned up tonight, and it's not the one that was playing against Oxford and QPR. So, yeah, there is an element of luck, but at the same time, I think when you've got players as good as we've got, you back yourself, don't you? Like I think some of the players after the game who spoke to Sky in the radio and stuff said virtually that. We knew we could sit in, we knew we could defend, but then we knew we had the quality on the pitch to hurt Coventry. And that was probably the biggest unknown coming into this game, because Isidor hadn't scored since February. Mayenda, he's a great player, but his goal scoring's been patchy. It's not like he scored 20 goals this season. And all the talk's been about what Lefebvre can do, but he, in that little run building to this game, hasn't really shown his true ability. So coming into the match, fair enough, there were questions about our ability. So was it 4? I think they said on TV we scored 4 goals in our last 10 games before last night. Well, yeah, then that's when you've got to start proving your doubters wrong. And I just think it was about backing ourselves, Chris. I don't think it was a great deal of luck involved. I think when we set out to plan for the game, it was we're going to be under the cosh for large periods of this game, ride through it, don't let the crowd get on their side too much, and when we get chances, take it. And it's a risky game plan, but it's served us well this year. If you think back at some of the big results we picked up, particularly away from home, that's how we've played. So, at this point in the season, when you've played 47 games now in EFL games, league games, that's your game plan. That's what you're good. You're good at it. It goes to 4th in the table. I said this through the week when people were saying, well, we need to go 3 at the back, and I'm like, no, that's not what got us this far. We're in this position because we're very good at this way of playing. So just stick to what we're good at, believe in ourselves a bit more, and if the mentality's right, it'll click, and it did. So, I'm happy, as you can tell.
Yeah. Jonny, I want to bring you in on that because look, Gav's just said that we knew the game plan, and every player kind of were up for it, and it was a different mindset, and the mentality was spot on. But then when you invite a team on you like that, like we said, that flap by Patterson in the first few minutes, we were one bounce, going left or right, or an inch here, an inch there, going behind early doors. And then after 15 minutes, it was a long ball through the middle where actually Ballard and 09 didn't pick up the runner, and they could have quite easily been in there. I mean, you're talking in the first 20 minutes, 73% possession for Coventry, that we just basically dug in and sat in our trenches on the edge of the box. I mean, looking at lots of comments, and I saw one specifically from Julio Arca as well, talking about the performance, which was maybe actually the opposite to some of what Gav said. Is there an argument to say that, look, at times when you play like that, you rely on luck, which I asked Gav, and the other one is when you've got players such as Dan Neil, Joe Bellingham, Lafay, Patrick Roberts to a certain extent, although he probably didn't have the greatest of games. You've got players like Mayenda and Isidor up front as a partnership. Is there not an argument to say, actually, we should and could keep the ball better and not defend by sitting in on the edge of our box, but defend by keeping possession of the football?
Well, to the first question, I mean, there's certainly an element of luck, isn't there? Because I mean, you've mentioned, some of the incidents early in the game, which, could have easily on another day with a different bounce or a different, split second decision by one of the defenders or one of the forwards, we could easily have been 1-0 down early in the game. So I mean, look, you can quibble about whether it's luck or whether it's good defending or whether it's poor attacking or what have you. But the fact of the matter is, there were chances that Coventry could have converted. So we could have been 1-0 down. And I think if we had gone 1-0 down early on, we would have been in real trouble. So, yeah, you can... I mean, as Gav said, that's kind of the way we've played all season. So I don't think it was... it wasn't a risky decision because the players know how to play this way and they've clearly bought into it. But, yeah, there's an amount of luck that you need to have. I mean, to win any game of football, but certainly when you play that way, you do need something to help you get through that opening salvo. But to the second point about whether we should be looking to keep the ball better, I think, firstly, at home, we certainly will try and do that. That the fact is we were away at a ground that we've not won at for, well, God knows how many years since we won against Coventry away from home. And even, since we won at home, it's been a long time. So I think you can make that argument about the home leg 100%. And that we've got enough good players who are technically gifted and good on the ball that can make a difference and can impact games. So, yes, I think if there's fans who are looking at that and thinking, well, I'd like to see a little bit more, I can totally understand that point of view. But like I say, and I think Gav said it already, that was nearly a perfect away performance. Like, you go away from home, you keep it tight, you look to hit them on the break and you exploit the chances that you can create. And I think we did that to a T. So I'm certainly not concerned about the way that we played on the ball. And I think it's something that, I would be shocked if we start the second leg the same way we started the first leg. So I think it's something we can work on. But also as well, we've seen Sunderland struggle to break teams down on the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to hit you with that one, Gav, because, that talking about keeping hold of the football, and I talked about the players that we've got. I mean, what do you say to those people who say, you and Jonny have already said fantastic away performance, brilliant, the way we set up and almost perfect in terms of how you go away from home. What do you say to those people who are saying we've got better players than that and we can almost play football against these sides rather than kind of digging in and defending?
I just don't think I don't think that's possible at this stage. And I think I alluded to that just before there. Yeah, we've got good players, but hang on, actually, what's good football? Like, to me, good football is what you saw last night. Sitting in, defending for your lives, blood, sweat and tears. 2 unbelievable goals on the break with pace. Yeah, we got a bit of luck with one of them, but still a great finish. Like, that's good football to me. I love, blood and thunder. I get bored of shit watching some football these days, to the point where I don't even turn my telly on to watch Sky Sports and TNT, because a lot of the time football's dull. that wasn't dull last night. It was exciting. Like, I had neutrals. I've got mates who aren't Sunderland fans, aren't Coventry fans, who were texting us after the game saying, I watched your game and it was a brilliant result and all that. You know what I mean? Like, that's the type of game when you turn your telly on, that's what you want to watch. But in terms of a performance from a bunch of Sunderland players, look, yeah, we've got good footballers, but I actually think technically we're not as, like, I know, yeah, we've got some good players, but technically maybe we're not as fancy, maybe is the word for it. We're not as fancy as some people think we are. Because, like, Job, for me, I was talking about him last night. Job is nothing like his brother in terms of playing style. When you think of Jude Bellingham, you think of somebody who's creative, goal scorer, very strong. He's an all-rounder. But for me, Job's a proper old-school breaker-upper in midfield who just wants to get stuck in, and he does the ugly stuff. But when you think about Joe Bellingham, he's getting linked to all these fancy clubs around the world. He's not going to go, if he goes away somewhere else, he's not going to go and be like his brother and score 15 goals from midfield. He's not that type of player. I think we've got a lot of them types of players. They're good technically, because all players who come through these days have got good technique. I think it's just the byproduct of the academy system. You know, Dan Neal's a technically good footballer, but his defensive attributes are probably more apparent than his attacking ones, hence why he doesn't get loads of goals and assists. And I just think it's the squad we've got. Chris Rigg, to me, yeah, he's a good technician, but he's also ratty and he gets into people and he's good at leading the press. You know what I mean? I just think that this is the way we play. And anybody who thinks that this team is going to change its style purely to try and fit into some sort of, I don't know, whatever people's idea as a good football is, it's just not going to happen. If you all you've got to do, Chris, is think back to last season when we finished 16th. We tried to play teams off the park. We tried to dominate possession and we finished 16th. And the season just fell to bits and it was crap to watch. We had to change style. And it's virtually the same group of players, isn't it? We've added pace in a couple of areas, but otherwise it's virtually the same team, but playing a completely different style. Last year, 16th place. This year, we might be in the Premier League if we carry on the way we're going. So what I would say to people is that whatever you think of the approach, it works and it suits these players, and that's why we've got to this point.
Yeah, I don't know how your memory's doing, but I can't remember us trying to dominate anything last season. If I'm completely honest.
Well, it was all just last season. It was all just, you know, we kept the ball, but it was so boring to watch, wasn't it? It was we would finish a game with 65-70% possession and get beat 1-0. And it's just, it's not to me, that's not good football. Like I said before, what you saw last night, that's what I love that. I love when you just go away, you dig in and you win. That's the best way to win a game of football. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love them being a defender. When I used to play, I much preferred that, basically because I was crap going forward. But, you know, that there was one reason why I loved it. Gav mentioned pace there, Jonny, and we finally got out just before the half-hour mark, and it was that break with Meenda picking the ball up kind of 5-10 yards outside our own box, and then he took that turn and took two players out of the game and then just charged forward, and he had Isidor alongside him, who maybe potentially he could have played in earlier, but you know, he eventually went down a little bit of a blind alley and got, I think it was our first shot off, especially on target. Well, it might have gone wide, I can't remember now, but in terms of Meenda having that pace, I said before the game that one way or another, whether he was on the left or whether he was up front, it goes back to how we played in the first half of the season, whether it was Mundell or Meenda having that pace and getting us out. And I was going to say, do you think that, you know, at times recently when we've played, I mean, obviously Mundell being injured, but when Isidor's been preferred to Meenda and we've had Lefay or Rigg in there in the midfield, that actually we haven't had that pace and we haven't been able to break as well as we did in the first half of the season.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason is because, Lefay's a wonderful footballer and we've got good ball players across the team, people who are good at passing the ball. And, you know, I mean, think of some of the balls that even someone like Trey Hume, you know, he's good at getting the ball into dangerous areas sometimes. But what we've really lacked without Mundell is somebody who's able to break the lines with the ball at their own feet. You know, that's something that Mundell was excellent at, like you say, you know, on that sort of half turn, he was able to receive the ball and he could take a player or two out of the game just by moving with the football, which is something that, you know, it's quite I was going to say basic skill. I mean, it's obviously incredibly difficult because, like you, Chris, I was pretty rubbish at it when I was playing Sunday League every week. I was a centre half as well. But it's something that, you know, I think it's overlooked. Certainly, you know, I mean, Gav touched on it before in this kind of hyper specialized and, tactic to death style of football that you see across a lot of the top sides. Something that's, a little bit overlooked and sometimes goes under the radar is the value of having somebody who can just get the ball at the feet and take a man on and get past them with pace. Because Patrick Roberts is somebody who's excellent at, carrying the ball, and he can beat players, but he hasn't got that raw turn of pace that somebody like a Mundell or a Mayenda has got. And so I think, that instance that you highlighted with Mayenda carrying the ball and getting that shot off, that was, in a nutshell for me, that's the value of somebody like that in the team, because you could give that ball to much more talented footballers who would not have been able to turn that into a goal scoring chance, as much as it might have been a little bit of a pot shot in the end from outside the box. We ended up having a chance to score a goal, and where he received the ball, if you'd shown that to Sunderland fans and said, do you think we'll get a shot off here? I think most would have said probably not, and rightly so, because Mundell and Mayenda, I think you're right to highlight those two are the kind of players who can do that for us. So that's, and going back to the team selection talk as well, that's part of the reason why I was so delighted to see Mayenda in the team, because he is somebody who gives us, he's raw, he's young, he's not the most consistent, but he definitely gives us something that not many other players can. And that's part of the reason why, obviously, he played so well last night. It's part of the reason he's played so well this season. And I think it's a big part of the reason why we've struggled so much over recent weeks, because we've not really managed to utilise that kind of outlet. So it was great to see that, being done last night. And there was that chance, and there was the other one. I think it was around the similar sort of time. Might have been in the second half. I'd had a few beers by then, but there was another one where Mayenda, ended up on one of those little runs on the break, and probably should have played Isidor in the second time. But whether he makes the right pass or not, just getting you up the pitch makes a massive difference. So great to see, and chuff for Mayenda.
Yeah, it was probably the same one, Jonny. You were just saying double, that's all. And
that'd be about right for me last night.
And I was going to say you sounded like you're in the Pepper's Killed Football Club. I think that's a podcast completely on its own for another day. Gav, watching the game and looking at my notes again for the first half hour or so. I mean, I was making a point, and looking at the stats, it was you could understand why, because Coventry had scored the most from crosses in the Championship during the season, but that's all they were doing basically. They were just trying to get down the line, bombarding us with crosses, and essentially, if you looked how they were in the centre, it was probably one of the reasons Ballard was in, because if you look at some of the challenges, especially on Patterson, they were trying to bully us in the air. I felt that they were some of the challenges they went up with, and I thought actually the referee did quite well to deal with it, because if you looked at some of the way they set up for corners, they were piling everyone on Patterson, they were standing on his toes, they were stamping on his feet, they were kind of pushing everyone out the way. And you made a point that I wanted to pick up on the reaction pod, that you actually thought we did a decent job in terms of not allowing them to cross the ball in, but I actually thought it was potentially one of our weaknesses, at which resulted in Ballard ending up having to be man of the match, because that's what he was there for, because so many balls came into the box and he would go first to them and had to make the blocks. That actually, do you not think it's something we really have to be wary of in terms of allowing them to, because there was a couple of specific instances, and look, Lefebvre for the goal was the obvious one. Patrick Roberts, I thought a couple of times didn't get tight enough. Hume got beaten down the line a couple of times. Serkin got beaten down the line a couple of times. But we've said it for years that one of the biggest crimes defensively out wide is to allow a player to cross the ball in. And I felt we allowed it too many times. Is that something we have to look out for in the second leg?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the point I made on the reaction pod was specifically about Lefebvre, because once Serkin got booked, Lefebvre basically had to play like a left back whenever we didn't have the ball, which was for quite large periods of the game. So you were asking Lefebvre to be the one who was trying to run down Sakamoto and stop him from getting past. And I thought he did generally a good job of it, despite the fact I think that one of his biggest weaknesses is his tackling ability. You can tell he's not a defender, but he did really well and he stayed organised. Generally speaking, though, yeah, you're right. We didn't do a good enough job of cutting the crosses out. But how do you deal with that, though? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's all well and good saying stop the crosses coming in, but sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes the players are good at opening up the space and getting the ball into the box. And I suppose what it is be very aware of trying to stop crosses going into the box, but also if you're organised in the box, you should be okay. Like that. I half suspect that's why Ballard started. Actually, the main reason why Ballard started it's because his biggest strength is heading the ball away, and we obviously we needed to make sure that when the ball went in there, we didn't allow it to drop, because we've done that so many, haven't we, this season? We've done it so many times this season where we've held on, we've dug in against teams, and we just can't defend the ball in the box. So yeah, we've always got to be wary of that. But I think the big one for me, and actually, just before I go past it, you're right to highlight the referee. I thought he did a good job. We're always keen to criticise referees when they don't do a good job, but I just thought he did a really decent job of managing the occasion, because with all that noise and the atmosphere and the you look at the night before when Sheffield United played Bristol City, dodgy red card decision and a penalty, and it's basically changed the course of the season for two teams. That one decision, so it must be tough to referee these games. But thought he did a really good job, and I thought the yellow cards he handed out were fair for both teams. The one on Sirkin, for instance, definitely a foul. I think it was Sheaf, wasn't it, in the middle, got booked for bringing down, I want to say, was it Isidor?
Ballard, I think, wasn't it? Was it not Ballard?
No, you're right, it was Ballard, yeah. Yeah, it was Ballard when he marauded. Yeah. So, no, fair play. The referee did a good job of managing the game and stuff. But, we just, let's see what kind of ref we get in the second leg, because it could just be, you don't get good ones more often. So, now you're making us worry about that.
Don't start on that, Gav. But yeah, I mean, look, talked about the 0-0 half time. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. We went in goalless. Great, looking at my notes, great, defensive shape, 2 banks of 4, threatening on the break, worked really hard, all that sort of stuff. Although we have talked about that element of good fortune that we needed. But one thing I did notice, Jonny, and Gav's touched on being prepared in terms of setting up and formation and being tight at the back and working on our shape. I mean, I thought it looks like we've really worked on free kicks and set pieces in general, because there was one just before half time that we well worked to get Hume's shot, and then there was a couple of clever free kicks and corners that got Hume a half chance at the back post, and we've clearly been working on different routines.
Well, it's something that we used to be really good at the start of the season as well, if you remember. I mean, that opening set of games, I can think of, there was a couple that that we were. Was it Sirkin, I think, scored a header really early on in the season at home from a free kick, where we had a little routine where we had sort of like a wall of players kind of blocked off the defenders, and then Sirkin just...
Was that Cardiff? I don't know if it was at home though, was it? But I think it was Cardiff, wasn't it, when he scored that header?
Maybe it was Cardiff.
My memory's shocking, so, I could be talking about last season.
God, so is mine. But you know what I mean? There was a few. There was that one where Sirkin kind of ghosted him round the back. There was, I can think of a couple of balls that Roberts was putting in from free kicks that were really clearly, well worked and well rehearsed. So yeah, it's something that, like I say, we were great at the start of the season. I think, to a degree, I understand why it's, you can't come up with a brand new set piece routine every week. If it was that easy, then everybody would do it all the time. But I think you're right to highlight it, Chris, because it's something that, it's a real strength when it's utilised properly, because obviously, a dead ball's one of those situations in football where, yes, the exact position of the free kick might differ or what have you, but it's something that you really can work on, and it should be repeatable in theory, because you've kind of got as much control of the situation as you'll ever get. So it was great to see us actually, clearly putting into practice something that had been worked on the training ground. And, Hume might not have done as well with the chances that we created for him as he maybe could have done, but I think we'll let him off, seeing as how he is a fullback. But just to see us actually, like I say, putting something into play that we've worked on and that we've thought about behind the scenes, I think it sounds daft as well, because it should be a given that you're working on things in training and then putting them into practice in games. But I think it shows that things are going right behind the scenes. The coach is clearly getting buy-in from the players. There's real thought being put in every aspect of the performance, and yeah, to see it being rolled out in a playoff semi-final, I mean, that's what you want, isn't it? That's what you train hard for all week. So it was really pleasing.
Yeah, well, listening to what Jonny's just said there, Gav, I think that this is where the first goal comes. This first goal almost comes off the training ground, because you watch Isidor. I know kind of it's in open play, but you watch Isidor. He puts in a challenge on the edge of the box, and you watch as soon as Dan Neil picks the ball up, even though it's not going to go to him, he starts sprinting from the edge of our box. and he sprints the full length of the pitch, and then has to kind of pull up when Lafayette's got the ball, because I tell you what, if that goes to VAR, we have a couple of minutes of panic, and so, we're sweating on that, because that definitely goes to that definitely goes to the video official, doesn't it? But if you look, like, I think this is because you almost see Isidor as soon as the ball comes to Dan Neil, he looks down and goes, right, I have to do this. He's almost programmed in to start sprinting the full length of the pitch, and gets the ball and ends up finishing it. And I'll argue a little bit that I'm not sure it was the best finish in the world. I mean, look, he gets it on target, and that's what a striker has to do. But you've got to question the goalkeeper.
Yeah, I think if you look at the shape of him and Mayenda, they don't. So obviously, your natural instinct is play off the shoulder of the last man, try and get him behind, wait for the threaded through ball. Watch them; they both go wide. So the bender runs wide, which basically means look at the space they've got space to run onto, rather than being physically up against the central defender trying to get him behind. Really interesting, because they both got pace, and that's probably the best utilisation of that. And you mentioned Dan Neil. All he was bothered about was giving it to Lafayette. He wasn't going to try that pass. He went, there's Enzo, give him the ball. But, I just think, there's an element of luck with the goal, because the goalkeeper should do better, but it's the power of the strike that takes it past him in the end. If he tries to side foot it, bend it in, Wilson probably saves it. Isidor gets full purchase on the ball, and it might not be the greatest finish in the world, but the power takes it beyond the goalkeeper. And I said this on the reaction pod, like, not for 1 second did I think he was going to miss. I felt really confident, despite the fact he's not scored in absolutely ages, had zero problems with Isidor in that position. I knew, because he's done that a few times this season, where he's got him behind, been one-on-one, and he's just twatted it one. And I just think that was a nice goal. Yeah, Wilson should do better. I sort of half joked on a pod earlier in the week, didn't I? That one that I did with the Coventry fan. I actually asked about the fact that he's a Mackem, but I doubt he meant it. But he didn't have the greatest performance, and the Coventry fans have been having a bit of a go at him, haven't they? I think that's something that, by the way, that the Coventry fan did say to us, was that they've had problems with goalkeepers all season. It doesn't matter who they put in goal; they're all shite. And Wilson's been there a lot longer than some of the others and played well against Borough last week, so he got the opportunity to play this one. But it'll be interesting to see if he plays on Tuesday, because he didn't cover himself in glory with the goals.
Well, we've covered their goal, because it was just a minute later. But I suppose in terms of the being able to get the cross in and all that. But I mean, Jonny, from your point of view, a minute later, because I don't think I'd actually finished celebrating when the ball hit the back of the net for them. You know how much of it was a blow for us, but you can imagine how much of it was a blow for the players after working so hard to get their noses in front. And the game plan clearly was to get their noses in front and then to hold on to it, and to lose that so quickly. And I think, you saw the reaction from us, and, there was a lot of anger, and, that you could see people looking around at each other. I mean, but then to come back and get going again and having to defend again and almost start from scratch. I mean, it shows, again, I mean, Gav's touched on it, but the mentality that the players have gone into it, where, it's a different animal compared to what we've seen over the last couple of months.
Oh, absolutely. And it takes a massive amount of character to have a setback like that. And like you say, I mean, so immediately after scoring, it must have really taken the wind out of the sails, even if only momentarily, because they clearly shook it off quite well. They came back in the game, and the performance for the rest of the match from that point, I think, you couldn't tell that they'd just conceded such a sucker punch goal if you didn't already know that they had. Do you know what I mean? If you'd watched it blind, you wouldn't have thought that was a team who'd just, gone one up and then been pent back immediately. So I think, full credit to the players for that, because to turn it around in the way that they did from that point, I think does take, like I say, immense character. And I think for such a young side to be able to pull that out in a big game when it counts away from home, I think is huge, and I can't speak highly enough of them for it, because it's not just the fact that they conceded, is it? It's obviously they went one up. It had been such a slog to get to that point and finally get the noses in front, and it was away from home in a tough atmosphere, a team that we'd not beaten so long, and all the stuff we rattled off at the start of the pod, basically. So in that kind of atmosphere, in that arena, to be able to do what they did, I think, it speaks so highly to them as footballers and as people, not to get too over the top and start giving them, keys to the city and, prime ministership and all that. But yeah, I think it was so impressive. And it to me as well, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but let's say we were to be at Wembley, I think it shows massive positivity for that kind of atmosphere, because to be able to cope as well as they did, I think it's difficult. You know what I mean? There's teams more talented than Sunderland and more experienced than Sunderland who've been in games like that and wilted before. So for us to pull it out when it mattered, I think, that's a huge tick in the box for us, for this playoff campaign going forward and for all these lads' development. But I tell you what, they can't be as disappointed as me when we conceded, because there was a table of mags sat behind us in the pub. So we'd all just turn around and give them a load of grief. We were absolutely giving it large. Conceded 2 minutes later, I went pretty quiet after that.
If it was even 2 minutes, like I said, I hadn't stopped running around the house and scaring the Bens. But by the time the ball at the back of the net for them. But, we made a couple of subs. Rig came on for Isidor with about 15 minutes to go. And then Mepham replaced Roberts on the 85th minute. So it was kind of like saying then on the 85th minute, brilliant. Look, we've got 1-1. Want to take that back to the stadium alight. We would have snapped your hand off before the game, I think, to take 1-1 back to the stadium alight. And then 2 minutes after we put an extra centre half on, it happened. That back pass, and I can't even remember the lad's name because I know Sky said it loads of times, but I couldn't be bothered to listen. If I'm completely honest, I don't care who it was.
Van Eywick, I think it is.
Yeah, maybe? The Dutch. That's the Dutch lad, wasn't it? But for the life of us, I've seen it a few times, and I don't know why he played the ball. He didn't need to play it, and it's funny because I was thinking, like, some of this might have been down to desperation because, it's 1-1, and they knew how much they needed to take a lead back to the stadium alight. They haven't won away since the 1st of March. The last 5 games, I think they haven't won away from home. And, that they were so desperate. I think that they almost kind of got nervy because they needed that second goal. And then they played that back pass. And I think Jonny touched on this at the start. But you've got to credit the fact that he's on it, because you look when he turned back to his goalkeeper, and Mayenda had already read it. He was already halfway. He was already kind of 5 yards on his way to chasing the ball down before he even played it. And then obviously he didn't put the power on it, and Mayenda was clean through. But and it sounds daft. I mean, they talked about it after the end of the game that Wilson kind of made his mind up for him. But in this situation, when you've got so much time to think about it, and you've almost got so much time that you're thinking about the context of your chance, later on in the game, it's 1-1 playoff semi-final. And you've seen so many strikers in that position just freeze and just do nothing with it. And because they've had so much time to think about it. And for a lad so young to have this head on his shoulders where, and again, the keeper kind of helped him in some senses, but to knock it a little bit wide on his left foot. And the thing is, the way he knocks it, I almost, my kind of heart jumped out of my chest for a little bit, because I thought his touch towards goal had to be spot on because he took it first time. But he does that, I mean, right in the middle of the goal, not a worry in his head, clearly. He just had confidence in himself. But this says everything about where Mayenda's kind of come from this season, from being out on loan, not working, and then to go and do that on this stage. I just think it's unbelievable from him.
Again, something I said on the reaction pods, I'll not repeat too much of it, is that I think, by far and above the most improved player in the team, but it's that composure that he seems to have developed. Composure and persistence. Like, he doesn't give up on anything. He's possibly the most persistent Sunderland player I've ever seen. I've never seen a player who just wants to win the ball constantly. He's just always on it, and always on it. And there was that chance in the first half where he nearly done what he did at where was it the other week when he won goal of the season. Totally forgot who he played, but he almost done that same thing again, and it was pure persistence. He just seems to just find ways to win the ball. So for me, it was just another example of how fantastic he is, and I'm a big fan of Mayenda. He's one of my favourite players, and just never had any doubt yet. Again, like I said, with Isidor, had no doubt he was going to score.
Yeah, well, Mayenda, Jonny, might have won the game in terms of scoring that goal, But on 90 minutes, Coventry, after a bit of a scramble, had the ball in the 6-yard box, and I just thought, oh no. I thought that, like the same as what I thought when, 2 minutes after we scored the first goal, right in front of goal. But we've touched on Joe Bellingham and the type of player he's becoming. But this tackle at this stage of the game, to not give a penalty away as well, to win the ball cleanly, less than 6 yards out, the lad's about to just stroke it into the back of the net and put them level. And Bellingham comes up with, I mean, you talk about Mayenda winning it, but this basically seals the deal. I mean, this is almost as good as Mayenda doing what he did at the other end. Unbelievable tackle. And basically this tackle means we go into the second leg ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the phrase "celebrating a tackle like a goal" has never been more apt, has it? It genuinely was as important, wasn't it? Like you say, as Mayenda's goal, because Mayenda gives us the advantage, and Job keeps it. If it wasn't for that challenge, I think you're right. We're going into that second leg 2-2. The wind's again taken out of our sails. We're looking at it with such a different perspective than we've all had this morning. I think this podcast would have been a very, very different tone if that had gone in the back of the net. So, I mean, we can wax lyrical again about Job all day, couldn't we? I mean, he's fantastic. A bit like you said about Mayenda, how far he's come from where he went on loan to Hibs and it wasn't working out. And then, I remember at the start of the season, all the talk all summer was Sunderland need a striker, Sunderland need a striker, Sunderland need a striker. Mayenda gets the nod and he gets those goals against Sheffield Wednesday and he doesn't look back. And even from that point to now, I think he's a much better footballer. You think back to the Joe Bellingham of the start of last season, the middle of last season, even the end of last season. He is leaps and bounds ahead of where he was then. And I think it's massive credit to him for he's clearly put so much work into it. And he now, I think, is such a complete isn't the word because, he's not a complete footballer, but he's so well-rounded. He has got so many different aspects to his game. And I think it was Gav before, wasn't it, saying that he's such a tough tackling midfielder now. I think he almost doesn't get the credit that he deserves for how disciplined he is out of possession and the footballing intelligence that he's got to be able to read the game as well as he does and make those kind of tackles in a 19-year-old kid playing in the Championship in the middle of midfield. I think, that's some talent that he's got. And the work that he puts in, it's clearly paying dividends, for him and for us. And so long may it continue. But yeah, obviously, he'll get the plaudits for the goals that he scores and the passes that he might play and the stuff he does going forward. But yeah, I think it's fully deserved for us to kind of call out this, this particular defensive action is the one that kind of gets the headlines. But I think it underlines where he's come to as a footballer because, I don't think the Joe Bellingham last season makes that tackle. And as you've said, and I think as I've said, I'll stop rambling now. But it sails us the win, doesn't it? So yeah, it was fantastic, and I think it's like I say, it's credit to him as a footballer, and credit to his calmness as well. Because to be composed enough to make that challenge, and like you said, Chris, to not give the penalty away so late in the game, he must have been knackered. It was fantastic.
Yeah, well, he wouldn't have made that tackle because he was stuck up front most of the time. That was half the problem.
Yeah.
But Gav, look, just rounding off. Looking at the stats. Amazingly, that you talked about 74% possession in the end for Coventry, but you look at the shots. They had 14, we had 10. We both had 3 shots on target. Although they had, we made 73 clearances, they made 22 touches in the opposition box. They had 31, we had 17, but. And, people always scoff at this. Sometimes I do, depending on the game. But the expected goals, 1.52 for Coventry and 1.46 for us, which just tells you about to a man, 2 banks of 4, the 2 up front. And as you've been talking about, the game plan, you look at possession, they had most of the ball. But actually, you look at the expected goals and you look at the actual shots. And if you took possession out of it, you go, oh, that's quite. You took possession and clearances and the touches in an opposition's box, and look at the shots and expected goals. You think that's a really tight game.
Well, it goes back to that whole, there's more than one way to skin a cat, isn't there? And Coventry's way of playing was to be direct, get balls into the box, throw-ins into the box, try and bombard us in that manner, and keep possession. And ours was to just break and counter-attack, and we threatened it 2 or 3 times in the first half, and we weren't very good at it, to be honest. I think Mayenda had a couple of chances to break where he probably should have passed it to Isidor, and he didn't. But in the end, we got that part of the game right. And like to me, possession doesn't really give you much of a context on a performance, because what matters is what happens in both boxes, right? You score and you concede, and whoever scores the more goals than the other team deserves to win the game. It doesn't matter how you do it. And I don't get overly concerned about possession stats, because I think actually more often than not, the less we have of the ball, the better we are, because of that raw pace that we've got in that forward line with Isidor and Mayenda. And the shame really has been this season that we haven't for whatever reason, we haven't been able to get both of them on the pitch that much. We haven't been able to do it with Mundell on the pitch, and we haven't been able to do it with Lefebvre on the pitch. And this is one of the little ticklers, isn't it, for the semi-final on Tuesday, is that we might be in a position where all 4 of them are on the pitch at the same time. So that makes it even more interesting to me, because unless you have the ball with those type of players on the pitch, and all of a sudden you break with pace, there can't be many more frightening prospects than having to defend against those players when they're making you run back towards your own goal. So we totally deserve what we got. The possession doesn't tell you a thing. Honestly, it doesn't. It's the defending, and it's the taking of chances. We didn't have loads. We took ours. Coventry had one. And you said they had 3 shots, but I only remember one chance, and it was that header they scored from. Otherwise, they didn't really have any massive chances for me. So, we deserve what we got, and so did they.
Yeah. Well, the build-up for the second leg starts here, Jonny. So, obviously, I'm not going to kind of go into predictions and all that now, but are you expecting us to approach the game differently?
I think we need to. I think I said it earlier. The way that we started that game, I think, was how we had to. I think, everybody knew that Coventry were going to come at us early on, because that's the way that they needed to try and win the game. I think most Coventry fans would have said before the game that they would have thought they needed at least, a couple of goals as a cushion to come to the Stadium of Light and be confident of getting the overall result in the semi-final. So they'll now, they'll know that they need, obviously, they need to score goals, because, they're losing in the tie on aggregate, but they'll know that they need to set up differently against us. They wouldn't have expected the way that we played, I don't think. Obviously, we have lined up with 2 up front, a few times throughout this season, but it's certainly not been the norm. So I think it'll have thrown them for a bit of a loop. So, they're going to come to the Stadium of Light, and they're not going to be able to start the game the same way they did, obviously, at home with their own fans behind them, and the natural momentum of winning on the final day to get in the top 6. That obviously would have carried them through the start of the game. I think that we're going to need to manage the game a little bit better, because as we've touched on earlier, the first half, we did ride our luck at times, and there were, hairy moments where it wasn't all within our control to ensure that the scoreline stayed level. So I think we're going to need to be just a little bit smarter, a bit of game intelligence, recognise when to maybe take the sting out of things, keep the ball a little bit. And I do think we will need to keep the ball more, because I don't disagree with what Gav said. You can basically ignore the possession stats from last night. They're almost meaningless. But in that second leg, I do think we're going to need to just be that little bit more controlled, that little bit more calm, and just make sure that we're the ones dictating the play. Because I think, we kind of had to, but I think we let Coventry dictate the game at times last night. And so, yeah, for me, the second leg, it's going to be all about us making sure that we put our mark on the game and stamp our authority and keep them at bay. And I think we can.
Yeah, Gav, do you think we'll try and get that first goal in the second leg?
Again, though, I think this might be a case of where we just have to deal with what Coventry throw at us for 20 or 30 minutes, because they've got now to lose. They're going to have to come and their mantra will be, we need to score early. That it might be ours too, but theirs will be, we need to score early, get the game level again, give ourselves as much time as possible to win it. So they're going to come flying at us despite being the away team. And I almost expect that will be, I know we say, yeah, we do need to be more controlled. We need to be maybe a little bit less wasteful on the ball than we were at their place. But I still think that you look at it and you think, well, they've got it all to lose now. We're the ones in the lead, so we're almost going to be like, well, what you got to chuck at us? And I think it might not be as long. We might not be under the cosh for as long as we were on Friday night, but I still think they're going to come with a similar approach, and I think we will. To be honest, again, though, it's about when we get the opportunity to calm the game down a bit that we take those chances. I am interested though, because this could be a sellout attendance at the Stadium of Light. There's going to be a good atmosphere. It's going to be bouncing, night game, and all the rest of it. I just wonder how easy that's going to be controlled for our players, because it's very easy to get swept up in the emotion of everything, and you've got your own fans behind you. They're probably going to want to come out and play a bit more. So it's quite an interesting matchup, isn't it? Because whilst they might want to play a bit more, I almost think we have to just and this is very typical of Le Bris, we almost have to try and work them out first, and then let the game develop from that point. I can't see us coming out flying at them, which is not our style. And I don't think Coventry will be expecting us to do that either. I think you'll probably see us do more of the same, if anything.
Yeah. Well, if someone who listens to this pod wants to tell us how many times we've said under the cosh, I'd really appreciate it, because I think we've said it quite a few times.
We're not being paid by John Parker and Chris Brown to drop these references in.
Well, that's it. But like I said, the build up for the second leg does start here, and I could talk about this all day, and in some ways it really feels like we have already. But I think that's a good note to leave it right there. So, Jonny, as always, I know you'll be rushing off to do your next podcast, so thank you very much for taking your time out for us, Jonny.
Oh, thank you very much for having us, lads. And I'll not be rushing off to a podcast. I'll be rushing off to have several paracetamol.
Okay, right, nice one. Oh, you'll get back on it. One of the two. It's one or the other. And cheers as always, Gav. I knew you couldn't resist coming back on, and I bet you'll be straight off and you'll be watching the highlights again, mate.
I will. Well, actually, no, I'll be editing this podcast, but I might have it on the other screen. I haven't watched the extended highlights yet, so I think it's next up.
Well, good luck with that. No, I don't envy you on that. But thanks again, everyone, for listening. If you're like me and Gav and Jonny, then after we've won, you'll want to soak up anything football related, and especially Sunderland related. So we've got loads for you to listen back to, and of course, with a quick turnaround, we will be looking ahead to the second leg, which we started the conversation here. So keep an eye on all the usual places. The next pod that should be dropping very soon. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.